Hello, back once again. Some of you have been asking for me to show you how to create the fasteners and bolt the whole thing together and everything else. So here's my gearbox. As you can see, I haven't got any bolt holes through here or threaded holes through here. I've got holes already existing here in this component, but there's no threaded holes on the other side. So there's two ways of doing this. One is to simply put corresponding threading holes on the other component, and you could put a set of clearance holes here and then threaded holes into this part to bolt the two halves together, and then bring in the fasteners and everything else. The other way of doing it is to put a whole series in which case you would put in the clearance hole this side, the threaded hole this side, and the fastener all as part of one operation. So it's two completely different methods that we can use. So let's do the first method first. Okay, so in this case I'm going to put a set of threaded holes in this part, the back of my casing, to correspond with where the holes are, the clearance holes are on the bearing support. So we need to open this part in order to do that. So let's go and look for it over here. Is the output casing. So I'm going to open part. There we go, and there's my open part. So this is where the boss sits on the back of the bearing support. So I need to put a set of holes around here to bolt onto. I'm just going to double check the orientation of those holes. So let's have another quick look. So we can see I've got it set up with a hole at the top and then going around. So let's go back to that part. There it is. So the first thing I need to do is to decide what size hole I'm going to use, and I'm going to use an M5 threaded hole going into this component to correspond with where those bolt holes are. Now I can either create a sketch and set up a point which I can then pick up on when I use the hole wizard, or I can create that sketch during the hole wizard process. In this particular case I'm going to do the second style. So I'm going to use hole wizard. I'm going to set it to a straight tap because it's a threaded hole. Got lots of different options there depending on what type of hole you need. We need to set the standard. We could either use ISO or BSI. If I choose BSI, then I get my M5. There we go. There's my M5 threaded hole size that I need. I'm going to set this to through all rather than setting a specific depth, and then I just need to position it. So I'm going to select that face, and I'm just going to pop my screw randomly above. Okay, now that I've done that, I can now try to position that more accurately. So I'm going to use the centerline tool. I'm going to try to pick up on the center line of this circle. There we go. And I'm going to pick up on the center there. Now I need to make that line vertical. There we go. Now I need to set the length of that line to 17, because these threaded holes are pitched on a 34mm diameter. So let's make these 17. That's okay. Now you can just about see that in my case my threaded hole is going to clip the edge of here, so I might want to actually change the type. Rather than being through all, is to set a depth. So I'm going to change that to set a depth. So instead of end condition, we're going to go blind and this will now set a depth. I don't want it to be 12.4 with 10 mil of thread. I'm probably only going to need about 10 for the drill, and then the thread depth about 8 should be fine. Okay, so that'll stop it going too far through. Okay, now I can click OK. There's my threaded hole, but of course I've only got one of those. Let's go to circular pattern. It's picked up on the threaded hole because it was already selected here. If it wasn't already selected, in which case instead of that being highlighted, it's not highlighted. If we go circular pattern, this time it's not highlighted, in which case we would need to select it here. This says basically where's the pattern axis, what are you rotating around? I'm rotating around this cylinder here. There's 4 so far, so we need to set equal spacing, 360 degrees, and then how many holes there are. There are 6 holes. There we go, there's my 6 holes. And we'll click OK. If you want to show better quality threads, in other words, so it's clear that there is a thread there, when you know, from a visualization perspective, we just need to go into options. We go to document properties, detailing, and we just turn on shaded cosmetic threads. Then when we click OK, there they are. So there's your threads. So we can save that. In this video we're going to apply a hole series that will put a counterbore hole, or 4 counterbore holes in this surface and 4 threaded holes in this surface, and corresponding cap head screws to fasten the 2 surfaces together. So the first thing we need to do is just double check that the toolbox is loaded. If you open the libraries button here, click on toolbox, and if the toolbox isn't loaded it will say toolbox not loaded, add in, and you just click on the add in button and then the toolbox will load up, and that should be good. So what we need to do is, first of all, we need to state where exactly we want these holes to be. And there's no geometry that we can lock onto quite easily with this casing half here, so we're going to create a sketch on this surface of the component itself. So there's our front component. We're going to right click and we're going to open that part, and we're going to put a sketch on here. And as if you see, we've got a hole through this part. Doesn't go all the way through, but that's the cavity, and we're just going to put hole here, hole here, hole here, hole here. But we're not going to do the hole in this part file. We're just going to set up a sketch which shows where those holes will go. So sketch, click on that surface, hit the space bar, go normal to. I'm going to make it so that I can see where that hole is. There it is. And I'm going to set up some points that we can lock onto. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to use a corner rectangle. So the 4 corners are where the holes are going to be locked to, and I'm just going to use this for construction only. So I've clicked the construction, and I'm going to lock it vertically by picking on the midpoint of that line and the origin, and then constraining that line to be horizontal. There we go. Now if I move this up and down, that will move equally. Now I could, because my origin is in the center, I could do the same kind of thing here, but I don't want to, because on many pieces of geometry the origin isn't necessarily in the center of the component, because I might have an offset cavity. So in that case we're just going to set up some dimensions. I need to set the hole pattern. So I'm going to set this at 60. I'm going to set that at 90. Actually, I'll make that 100. And I'll set the distance from this to the origin to 50. There we go. So there's my basic sketch, which is going to constrain the holes, and that's it. So we come back out, and I'll reset the view style. Now this sketch is visible, and I want it to be visible while I create the holes. But afterwards I'll go back and I will hide the sketch. There. Don't suppress it, or you'll lose the link to the geometry that we're going to create. So let's save that part and go back into the assembly, wherever that is. There it is. There's my assembly, and we'll click yes to rebuild. So there's the basic sketch that I've created. Now in the assembly view, I'm going to create another sketch. Like so. And in here, ignore this. And in here, I'm going to put some points on these corners. 1, 2, 3, 4. Click OK. Oops. Right, so I've got my 4 points. I can come back out of the sketch. I could, if I wanted to, hide this now. So I'm hiding the sketch in my front case. There we go. So it's just leaving now these 4 points which are in the assembly. Now I can go to the assembly tools, assembly features, hole series, and we're going to set up first of all we need to choose where it's going to go. It's going to go on that point. I've just set up these points to do exactly this, to lock the locations of those 4 holes. We can set up the hole type. It's a clearance hole, counterbore, to allow these bolt heads to go in, or rather not bolts, they are cap head screws. And I've specified that I'm going to use M6 socket head screws. If I wanted to, I could use bolts, crosshead, cheese heads, whatever, screws, you know. I'm using socket head screws. Set the end component, which is this one. And I'm going to set it up for 12mm thread depth and 17mm tap. In fact, I might give it a bit longer than that. There we go. And I'm going to click OK. No, I'm not. I'm going to place the fastener. Almost forgot. Now it wants to it wants to put screws in there a little bit too long for what I want. So I'm just going to back these off a little bit. Let's chop those down to 35s. And we'll just drop that down a little bit more. Try 30. There we go. So there's the screw length. And there's the hole length. So we'll click OK. And hopefully there's our bolts in our holes. Job done. Fantastic.